Welcome to Collector's Corner, the premier digital art platform.
We help collectors gain and maintain their edge, all while appreciating beautiful art.
Let's jump in.
Thank you for the awesome music from Cactoid Labs. Welcome, everybody, to the first Twitter Spaces we've had in a while. We're super excited for this one because we have the fantastic William Mapan, who, well, my name is Aston. My avatar's up here talking from our account. William is my favorite artist. I didn't want to speak for anyone else, but I've made that very clear to anyone who listens to our content. And we're joined today by him, which is super excited. Also joined by Jared_Pause, the big bold squiggle avatar here, who is my co-host on the podcast. He's also starting his own launch platform, the 8NAP Digital Art platform. And we have Lady Cactoid, who's part of Cactoid Labs, a fantastic curator, technologist, and just an awesome person who put this all together along with Cactoid Labs, their technology arm that's making this happen. So really excited to have everyone here to talk about Distance, William's latest release. And just maybe we could start with you, William. How are you doing today? And thank you for joining us.
Hello. Thanks for having me, actually. Always a pleasure. How's it going? Well, good. All good so far. Summer has been tough because, kids and summer doesn't make a good mix, but I'm trying to recover.
Yeah, absolutely. And we know you've been working super hard. So, we just really appreciate you spending the time away from family and from work with us. And LC, I thought maybe I could throw it over to you, see how you're doing. How's everything going?
Sorry. Good. Thanks so much, Collector's Corner, for having William and us speak today about this very important body of work that William has been developing for almost a year now. And to give everyone a little bit of overall context, this is volume 5 of the Los Angeles County Museum of Art's blockchain initiative called Remembrance of Things Future, where we have invited LACMA and Cactoid Labs, working with LACMA's Art and Technology Lab, have invited artists working digitally to respond to works in the museum's permanent collection. So these dialogues have taken different shapes and directions with different artists, ranging from IX Shells to Def Beef. And we have been, with William, looking at a very important early watercolor by Paul Klee. Paul Klee was a German-born but Swiss-based modernist who is well known as well for having taught at the esteemed art and design school, the Bauhaus. So Paul Klee made a watercolor that William was really drawn to in 1914 that is important because it marked Paul Klee's move into abstract art. So the work is called In the Carouan Style, Transposed in a Moderate Way. And I'll be sharing that image, but it is this beautiful small watercolor that Paul Klee created actually when he was traveling in Tunisia, a place that he returned to actually many times after this first encounter. And it became kind of a new mode for working for Paul Klee. He had been making work that, was figurative, looked like people and houses. And then he started to move into more geometrical kind of explorations. So William I would love to maybe, speak with Jared and everyone here about what initially drew you to this Paul Klee work. Because William and I went through a lot of different possibilities in the museum's collection, and his work has taken different kind of shifts in that exploration process. So, William, maybe you could talk to everyone about what first captivated you with the Paul Klee work and how you started out, even earlier thinking in a more reduced color palette. You were working with white and grays, and then you moved into this Paul Klee mode of really exploring all the different color ranges.
Yeah, I think I've actually shared some. I put some algorithm when it was all white and grays, maybe last year, maybe a bit past weeks. And at first, when I had this like quote unquote constraint of finding something in the LACMA collection, parent collection, we didn't find anything. We looked for something similar. I could, played myself on for like weeks, maybe months. But we didn't find anything like but on these like sculptures or stuff like that, plaster, but it wasn't talking to me that much. So I kept digging in the infinite like my collection. And yeah, I found, so I was looking for more abstract and geometrical at the same time pieces. They're not much, but there's this one from Paul Klee in 1914. And I immediately knew it would be this one because it could have been made by a generative artist because it's like a grid with simple colors and simple shapes. And this is basically what you start with when you learn, creative coding / generative art. You start with very simple rules, and the simplest rules, one of the simplest rules there is a grade. So yeah, I immediately thought, okay, I'm gonna go on that. And what struck me really is that all partly broke the grade with colors, and that's always something that fascinated me with Paul Klee, how he uses colors. So yeah, it was a instant match. The funny thing is that I didn't know it was Paul Klee at first, because when I was looking for something in like my collection, I was only seeing the thumbnails, and I saw this thumbnail full of colors. So I click on it, I look at it deeply for a long time, and then I see Paul Klee, and we're like, oh, okay, it makes sense actually. And yeah, it's like an honor in a sense for me to communicate with this piece. So yeah, I went straight into it.
So, William, one of the things I've always been fascinated with your work has been the brilliance with color, and I should point out one of the messages that's pinned to the top is the LACMA's interview between Lady Cactoid, Elsie, and William, which I think is absolutely brilliant. It's a must read. I've read it twice already, but you talked about your almost, I'll call it, obsession with color, and how you'll take some of the core colors of RGB and mix them yourself before buying it. I think that it's an incredible concept, and it goes back to basics. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about that process and what's the inspiration behind that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, the little story, I don't know if it's important or not, but yeah, I don't like one of my daily practice is to have fun mixing colors. That's how I started with painting, to just start with the simplest palette. So it would be one red, one blue, one yellow, and try to mix as much color as possible with these three colors. Then you had another blue, another red, another yellow to have like a cool and a warm of each color, and maybe some white to control the brightness, the value of the colors. And that's basically my practice with colors. It's just like a reflex for me, I would say. So I don't like to buy colors before I know how to make it more or less. That way, I really feel connected with the colors. The way I apply it on the canvas or the paper, whatever, and the struggle I had to find this color is very important to me, because I don't say we have to struggle to find colors, but my way to connect with the color is to find it by mixing. So it's a very basic practice for painters. This is quite recommended actually, to not buy every possible color you can find in an art supply store, but that's just start with simple colors and build up from there.
I only bring it up because I think that it's important, especially one of the things I've loved about your work is that connection to color and seeing just how primal that is to get back to basics, and the connection and the struggle, the pride. The whole process is just something it was really fun to read and unearth and really see a little bit of insight into your process. So I appreciate you sharing that with the world, because it helps cement why you're so good with the color.
Yeah, I think because I have this practice, it also helps me to differentiate the different shades of the same hue. So there's these games where you have to find the closest color to another. I always love these games, and it's basically this with color mixing is you have like a target to attain, and you just like, okay, I need a bit of more red, I need more blue, I need more white, and you just navigate the color wheel like that. For me, this is fascinating to be able to mix almost every possible color you see in the world with just like like three basic colors. So yeah, I try to then transpose this to code to just find colors that way, and man, yeah, that's my way of working with colors.
I loved hearing about that as well, and was going to ask about it. So I want to reiterate, even if you're listening to this, like definitely go back and read the article, the interview between Elsie and William. It's fantastic. And I just thought it was so cool that you go through this process and the way it really helps you, I guess, connect with the colors that you then use in your pieces. And I was wondering, do you do a similar approach with computer or when you're doing it on code? Have you tried using just the simple basic colors there and building up the ones that you see? And a follow-on question to that, sorry, I just really curious, how do you go from translating the in real life colors you're making with paint into code?
The last question, how I do it is basically I just eyeball, I eyeball the colors, because if I did the color mixing to find this color, I should be able to find it back in a way or another. And it's not about finding the perfect, color by picking, the picture. It's about finding the right hue and the right value to match the whole composition. So it's a pretty basic concept with painting. The value, you have to control your values. So that's what I try to do with my code. So the whole color gymnastic is very new with this series. But before I was just, in Photoshop and trying to eyeball the closest color I had on my physical palette. That was before. Now it's more about working with hue, saturation, and value mode, and not RGB. So basically, I will put some some values in the hue, some values in the saturation, some values in the brightness, and try like that to approach the color I had on the palette, which at the end I find this much more, how to say, easy for me, because at the end of the day, it's the same than mixing colors. You just try to find a bit of more blue, a bit of more red. Is it cooler, warmer? What's the value of the color? And that way, I felt with this series I could easily build color harmony within the whole composition, where before it was much more harder because I had to go to Photoshop and then, okay, is this color like next to this one, not too contrasty, not the same value. So it's always hard to work like that with RGB, but in HSV it's much more easier. And basically to control my value, I think it's a trick I saw on YouTube somewhere. I don't know. I don't remember, but physically I will try to. I don't try. I do take a picture and I convert it in black and white mode to just see the values. So you just see your black and whites, and if the composition is too gray, it means you have a problem in your values. So you try to have a bit of contrast. So that this, I transpose this in code by just doing a shader where I convert everything in black and white and see my values like that. So it's always, I have two modes of working. When I do it in my browser, in real time, I will toggle the black and white mode to see if my values are correct all the time.
Yeah, go ahead, Jared.
Well, I was going to say, you made reference to, Aston talked about the connection of your work to, going from real color to code color. And one of the things that from the article that I really was drawn to, and honestly it made me chuckle a little bit, is, and this is the quote, it says, "It was very messy. My code is very messy. It's always something new that I'm looking for." And I think that that's going back to, I wanted to pile on this and go back and double click on it, because it feels like you're constantly experimenting and trying to push the bounds of code, and your passion for the code and your engagement with the code. I almost, the question that came to mind when I read this initially was like, how do you find that order in all of that chaos for you? When somebody describes something as messy, it might feel chaotic, but it feels like it's like your comfort zone. And I just kind of wanted to, click onto what is that juxtaposition, and how does it motivate you in the long
run? I'm not sure I did catch the last phrase. Can you?
I think he was wondering how you balance the order and the chaos. Those two contrasts in your work.
It's a mess. Yeah, it's a mess. Yeah, basically, yeah, it's not basic, but it's like an iterative, I would say, process where I always start with some kind of structure. And this work from Berkeley was perfect because it forced me to start with basic structure, which is a grid. Well, his grid is not super easy to do, I would say, but you can easily do something good looking like that. So it forced me to go that way with the grid. And so that was my order. And what struck me with this piece is how the colors break the grids. With watercolors, the water dilutes and goes everywhere. So for me, that's a way to break structure. And I wanted to do that with my code. So that's where I introduced chaos. I don't even control it fully. Sometimes I'm always surprised by what the algorithm does, because it's kind of a simulation, not really like a proper water simulation, but I made my own messy thing. where the color will diffuse depending on the zone, on the kind of pattern. If the color is supposed to be dry or wet, is it supposed to be thick or transparent? So that's where I can introduce some kind of curve into the grid, and that's how I think we can see how the color just go overboard everywhere, and so you can feel the structure, but you can almost forget it with the colors. So that was the goal with this.
That's awesome. And there's just something really captivating about thinking about the almost the struggle, right? The struggle between balancing order and chaos, where you want a little bit of each. And I'm really curious because we talked once on DMs about how you've been working on this algorithm, the code painting algorithm. I see you trademarked it now, which is awesome. And this idea of replicating what you do create physically in code, and on kind of a meta level, the physical is always messier. I find it interesting as you're talking about distance, and even Klee's piece, how there is order from the grid, but even the grids he draws are not perfect. They are still a little bit random, and everything, you have to really purposely infuse that randomness into anything that you're creating with code to make it look like it was created by hand. And I'm just curious to hear from you, as you've gone on this journey of refining this algorithm. Is this making you, do you have more questions? Are you more interested in exploring it further, or do you feel closer to the goal, if there is one? Because it's been really awesome for me, and I'm sure a lot of people in the crowd, to see you evolving this style as time has gone on.
Well, first of all, I didn't trademark code painting. I think it's just for me a way to troll everyone and to say code can paint. Because we are used to say, I made an oil painting, I made an oil pastel painting, I made a watercolor painting, but we never say I made a code painting. So like, okay, I'm gonna attack some people on this side. It can I kind of work because I get some angry answers sometimes, so it means it works. But to go back to the question, is there a goal? I think the goal for me is to be in between my physical and digital practice. The goal is not to perfectly reproduce some paint or crayon or whatever it is, but to make more a feeling and to abstract the medium. So sometimes I feel very upset when people say, oh, no, painting is superior to like a watercolor painting. I don't get why there is this medium war. So for me, to do this is a way to abstract the medium and to just express feelings and emotion through just colors and texture. The texture is not even perfectly the same as a paper. I could do convincing paper, but I don't do it. I just like to evoke some kind of touch that you have with your fingers, your eyes, your nose, all your senses. So for me, I think I don't know where the goal is yet, but I'm searching for it. It's basically something in between where I try to abstract the medium and still get the emotion we get with our senses. I think it doesn't have to be, paint looking. It could be fully digital. I think you could do the same. It will be just harder, I guess. But yeah, there's no real goal. It's just exploration of what we know from paint and my observation as well from light and colors.
So, William, I wanted to bring it back to this project distance, and again, I keep referring to the Lady Cactoid interview. But in that you shared your connection to obviously the in real life piece at the moment, and the gridding nature, the watercolor leaking over outside that grid, almost not following the natures of it. And if you can't tell by the obnoxious background noise, I'm actually in an airport. So when I was reading this piece, it struck me that there's also a reference to like the aerial view of when you're in an airplane looking out the window. Can you maybe share with the listeners some of that inspiration and tie it back to this project? Because I found it really fascinating. And for somebody who's constantly on the plane myself, this was a really cool connection that I had, and I think a part of the story that I'd like to just double click on a little bit further.
Yeah, definitely. So basically, I have to stop to say basically. Nothing is basic. But the idea is to, like, when I saw the poultry piece, after analyzing with my generative artist brain, oh, this is a grid, this is blah blah blah. What is the emotion? What does it mean for me? So I went and dig a bit into the history of the piece, and so it was made while he was traveling, and he developed a new style and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, so this is a piece about travel. How can I connect with poetry through travel? And my way to interpret travel is through, to aerial view from a plane, or it could be like a train, whatever. And I felt when I saw this piece, like you can immediately step back and imagine somewhere. And for me, that's a powerful, very powerful feeling to see a piece and just to be transposed somewhere else. So that's what I wanted to try to do in my own work. How can I make travel people with a piece? And on top of that, I mostly known cityscapes for like half of my life until I was 16. So I didn't really knew what was countryside until I was 17 when I moved in the countryside. So when I was taking the plane back then, I was like, oh, what is, I could like imagine the life of the people I was not seeing down there. I was just seeing patterns, but I didn't know what was the life there. I don't know who was making this kind of pattern so beautiful. So my imagination worked a lot. But once I moved, I started to develop a real connection with the countryside. Oh, okay, I could, like, once I got my driving license, I could go to, the land and just take my photograph and just take some picture just because it was beautiful. So I have this late connection with the countryside that I wanted to represent in the piece. So a lot of palettes are green because where I was living, it was mostly green. It's in the center of France, and it's mostly lands. There's nothing else. So yeah, there is these patterns that can evoke lands. And at the same time, I wanted to evoke cities. So there's smaller patterns, and sometimes they collide. That represents my adaptation to countryside. I was, the only black guy in the countryside, coming from the city. What is happening? What is this world? So I had a lot of adaptation to do. So I wanted to have all these kind of concept into one piece to have these confronting worlds. So each pattern can represent something. The tiny little squares are the cities. The long rectangles are the landscapes and stuff like that. So I tried to build upon poultry pieces and build this connection with my experience on top, and to make all this mix that we have now.
And I love the way you integrate a lot of your personal stories and experiences into your artwork, and I appreciate you sharing that with everybody. You know, one of my favorites is from Dragons when we were able to talk in the palette Mario Karty and just the story behind that. Like it's so brilliant the way you weave that in and create that personal connection for the collector and admirer. So thank you.
Yeah, I think it's important for an artist to convey something, whether it could be political or personal or whatever you want to say. I think everyone in the world has something to say. Uh, sometimes, sometimes it's dumb, sometimes it's very smart, but in all cases, you have the right to say something. So I think, as an artist, you have to say something to share, because I think art is about communication and sharing. So yeah, I always try to incorporate some personal experience.
Yeah, and actually, I remember when we were talking about Strands of Solitude before that released, and you mentioned that a lot of the names for the palettes were not just the names, but also the way that you thought about the palettes and the patterns had to do with some of the emotions that you were feeling during COVID. And it was even called Strands of Solitude there, the solitary time for a lot of us. And I love how you are able to really translate your emotions, like what you're describing here, being in the countryside. Like that's amazing, being in a different place from what you're used to, feeling like you didn't have people who are like you around, and it just really makes this pop out, and it makes me understand it a lot more. And so you're doing a fabulous job of communicating through this art, which is, I agree, it's wonderful. And one of the other things you've been communicating, you shared a little bit earlier today on Twitter. You said that you shared an earlier output. You said you were testing ways to break the grid, and it didn't fit the concept. And I'd love to hear a little bit about the progression of this project. Maybe what things did you discover that ended up in the final that kind of surprised you, or anything interesting really about the process that you went through in the early iterations of this art itself?
Yeah, I mean, I talked about a bit about that earlier, but I really started with this white, engraved output, and even before it was, the piece I sold with Sotheby's, I think, last year, about like the algorithmic painting genesis. So it was the first one for me to start to experiment with this kind of feeling of of touch. Of you can touch the color, you can touch you can have sensation. And so it was very, very abstract back then, and I was iterating on this algorithm for a long time. But when I saw the piece from Berkeley, I immediately stopped doing that, and I went full back into very rigid grids. And once I had the basics, the foundation of my algorithm, I tried to break that grid, because that was the first concept of to break the grid with colors. So I started to find and to build some kind of simulation with code, and just to take a section of the grid and make it flow and explode it. And I was like, yeah, that's cool, but maybe too much. So it maybe too much compared to the bulky piece. I was feeling it wasn't talking to it anymore. I was just making a mess. Beautiful mess. It was very expressionist, but no, I had to put it on the side. And the more and more I was progressing on the piece, the more and more I understood how to break the grid. And it was not about breaking not physically, because everything is like on the code, but visually not breaking the lines, but more breaking the connection between the colors, and how to make a good flow between colors, and how to transition them, how to put them on the grid and stuff like that. So yeah, I changed a bit my mind about how to break the grid. That's the result we have now. It's more about merging some colors and merging the edges and not breaking the grid.
So again, sorry for some of the background noise here. I've got a couple DMs and it's rough. So appreciate everybody bearing with me as we balance life. But one of the things that I found really fascinating for you, William, was, and I found it really crazy, is you stated that you start fresh with code every single time. And I've been speaking to a lot of lately.
Hey, Jared, you cut out for about 5 seconds
I got
there.
hugged by a phone call, heaven forbid. Such is life, right? The beauties of Twitter. But one of the things that I found amazing is that you start fresh on your code with every project. And having talked to a lot of artists lately, a lot of them have a set of tools that they often go back to. So can you talk to us about maybe the mindset you have around starting fresh on every project? And then part two of that would be, you talk about having lots and lots and lots of simple layers that go onto the code. I'd love to understand the thought behind that for the art output also.
Yeah. So why do I start fresh every time? I agree it's a bit it's not usual. Certainly not in the coding industry and coding community. You have your starter, you have your library, you have a good set of tools to not lose time. But I like to wonder. I think you can have pretty quick results with code when you wanna make art. Like the basic tutorial you'll see on internet, in like hundreds of lines, you can have beautiful things. So I think it's not that hard to start over every time. And the more I do it, the more automatisms I develop. So it's not a pain. Obviously, I still have some, like maybe a couple of files, like okay, the WebGL renderer, the main file to init everything, the program function. Maybe I have maybe like 4 or 5 files I reuse. It's mostly for initialization of the canvas, but it's always white or black, usually black with WebGL. But I just like to start fresh because I'm not constrained to anything I've done before. Basically, that's the idea behind. I don't wanna start from another sketch. I want to start from my new idea. And don't get me wrong, sometimes I go back in time and I continue a sketch, but I don't do it to start another one. I just continue this one. But if I was about to start a new one, I just delete everything and start from scratch, import this couple of files, and we're good to go. And I think it's more liberating for me to have nothing to deal with in a way. So I just like to be free on my canvas and not to be constrained. That's also why I don't like to use library. There's nothing wrong about using libraries, but it's just not for me because I'm mostly fighting them. I'm like, oh, can I do that? And they're like, no, you have to do this way. I'm like, no, I don't want to do it this way.
No, and that's amazing. It definitely shows up in your work where each of the series have its own individual personality, but yet are like there's a consistent throughput of like William and your artistic style. So I appreciate you sharing that insight because it does allow for a lot of like good diversity in your algorithms.
I think because I also come from the advertising industry and especially the real-time industry, so I was making a lot of websites, like 3D crazy things in the browser. I have this habit, I'm very connected to the video games industry in a way where I like to build pipelines to render things, and every masterpiece in video games has their own pipelines. So it just something I have done for like a lot of time, like 10 years. So for me, just a habit now to just say, okay, if I make my next thing, it has to be from scratch, like any masterpiece.
That's awesome. I mean, every part of this conversation just is continuing to make me realize uh, how deep and thorough and thoughtful your process is. And so it's really cool to see how you're bringing elements from your past, the video game industry into this. And I'm sure it results in a distinct artistic expression, which is really, really a pleasure for all of us to be able to see. And speaking about seeing your artistic expression, I wanted to actually ask you a question, Elsie, Lady Cactoid. I know you got a chance to see William work a little bit, and I was just wondering if you have any comments on what it was like to see his process and, um, just to spend time with him.
Yeah. Well, I am just kind of blown away by William's process. I think what has really become clear to me. I mean, William, you were just talking about this idea of freedom and liberation and exploration. To me, like at the essence of art is experimentation and communication. And I think one of the great kind of like opportunities in terms of bridging art and technology is the unknown of what can happen when you really begin experimenting with ideas and tools and just letting that path take you to unexpected places. I think, William's inclination to start from scratch every time and just his love for the craft um, is something that you just feel so much. I think, if William were less ambitious, he could have released so many different series from the algorithms that he's been working with over the past year, but he was intent to like let this he has also just sort of described to us this idea of like him as a sort of astronaut exploring a system and a sort of space that he created, and like that process of exploring being kind of at the root of the art itself. One thing that I think a lot about is painting, because I grew up painting and my father is a painter, and I love painting. I really love colors and mixing colors. And I think that what I think that a lot of people try to translate a painting into code. But I think what William is doing is quite different, is that he really is painting with code and making the code behave in a organic and like emotional kind of feedback loop with himself and with what he is experimenting with physically, because as he has shared, he often paints with gouache or oil on paper. And it's totally magical to me. When I look at the textures, I mean, even last night we were looking at different outputs coming out of the generator, and my kids are just blown away that it's not that it's digital, because it looks like a painting, and yet you're able. I mean, I think that's one of the very incredible things about generative art, is the ability to create all of these different possibilities. And because William's work is so deep and so compelling, you have like for every color palette all of these world of possibilities. and they're all like glorious paintings to me. So I don't know. I'm just super in awe of his vision and talents, and also, like, I think the conversation between the Bauhaus and what is happening now is quite interesting, because Paul Klee taught at the Bauhaus. The Bauhaus was a place where people were really thinking about art and technology. So yeah, I really just couldn't be more excited for all of the outputs to generate next week. And I think this is a very complex body of work that we are all going to have great fun digging into with William, especially once, we can kind of experience the different ways that the metadata is described by him, which I'm excited to see come out. And yeah, so thank you guys so much for bringing all these thoughts out. I'll let you. I wanted to mention another thing, actually, is that in conjunction with this distance series at LACMA, which I have pinned to the top of my Twitter, we have a series of animations that William made called Compute Syncing Patterns, which many of you are familiar with and are collectors of. But it's this really gorgeous blue series that is, being seen by thousands and thousands of people at the museum right now. And it's just a really, really beautiful way for people to experience the work physically at LACMA. So thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
LD.
Oh, please. Go ahead, William.
I would just mention something, because when I say painting with code, doesn't necessarily mean skeuomorphisms, something like that. I think for me it means having a process to paint. What painting means? Does it just mean for me? Does it mean you have to lose yourself in the painting? You control everything you do, how the brush reacts. And for me, because I build all these analogies of, okay, I'm gonna have a brush, I'm gonna have some behavior, being dry, being wet, being transparent, being opaque, thick, impasto, stuff like that. For me, it's my way to transposing my practice into code. So for me, just like another painting, but the medium changes, but not the process. That's why I call them code painting. But it could be anything. It could be very, digital looking. It could be still a painting if the process is to paint. So that's something I wanted to specify.
No, that's awesome, and unsurprising given how thoughtful you are and thinking about a lot of these things on the meta level. You got to make sure to include that in the trademark application, though. That's trademarking a process. No, I'm just kidding. And we wanted to open it up to questions for anyone in the crowd, and so please go ahead and raise your hand if you have a question for William. And while folks are doing that, I wanted to also shout out that collection Compute that Elsie was talking about that's at the LACMA. William, I actually finally got a piece of generative art framed, and I have one of those pieces, the print. It's the first one I've put up in my office. So I love that collection. I think it's awesome.
Send me a picture.
I will. I'll send you a picture. So please, if anyone has questions for William, this is your chance. The man is here. And while we're waiting, I wanted to ask you, like, what else are you working on? What else is interesting you right now these days? Are you continuing to develop code painting or something else that's fascinating you?
Yeah, this last 4 months will be very intense for me. This year is intense. but the last month will be very intense because I have this 10 series. So it'd be like a fireworks, everything happened at the same time. I have the verse show next month, and then I have a collaboration with Avant Art, I never know. So it's a lot. So for me, it's a bit of a fireworks, like the bouquet final of the fireworks, which that is 2023. But that's my way to say I worked for so long, so many time, for such time. Here, everything I got. And I think next year I'm gonna focus on not doing that much long form or anything like that, but more doing physical, maybe collaboration, stuff like that. So I wanted to finish with a big final, I would say.
That's awesome. Well, looking forward to it. Maybe you'll come out with a one-of-one called Fireworks, knowing you now at the end of it. But 2009, thanks for coming up. Please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. Thanks. It was really, William, really interesting to hear you speak about your process and the coding art with emotion. I really like that. I just had a quick question, and this isn't a slight to anybody or any artist deciding to go CCO or zero, or royalties. But I was curious your input on this. I often thought that, the images that are generated by generative code, it's always questioned to me, is that the ownership the artist, or is the ownership of the machine? And should that be CC0, the outputs, not the coding? And I hope I'm not offending anybody here, because I know there's an immense amount of effort to put into coding. I trust me, I know that. So I just thought I'd ask you first. I haven't asked any other generative artist that question yet.
I think for generative artists, it's the output is tightly connected to the code. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't put my stuff on CC0 for now, mm-hmm. because it's something I don't know how to express it yet. I thought about it already. It's an ongoing process for me to think about, but I really tight. It's really, the connection with the code and the output is so tight that, like I said,
you feel like it's a birth of your code. I understand.
No, I mean, like, because I build like a universe of parameters of outputs. Mm-hmm. It would be weird for me to just extract one. If something has to be CC0, it would be the whole code and not just one output, I would say.
Yes, I follow that. Interesting. Anyways, thank you very much. I just wanted to get your input on that. But thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you, everyone, for great spaces. I'll step down now. Thanks.
It's a cool insight onto CCO. I think that, like, for generative art, at least my perspective is that the beauty resides in the algorithm and some of the unknown with exploring all the different corners of that algorithm. That being said, it's kind of a nice transition. William, is there any parts of this or any outputs that surprised you, or anything that through those test nets that kind of made your jaw drop?
I think the whole thing is amazing to me, and I think this is the first algorithm I don't fully control. I think I let go a lot on this one. It's hard to explain, but so far my algorithm has been very, controlled, like a freak. But and I try every time to let more and more chaos and randomness. So I try to let go control basically with my algorithm. And with this one, because of this whole simulation thing, I don't know what's happening. And I went a bit further with this one, where I build like components, and each component have influence with the whole composition. So I mean, I could probably know what will happen if I could like list every possible possibility, but it would take like several years, I would say. So yeah, I'm very surprised every time I hit refresh. It's amazing. Really, the feeling of being surprised by your own thing is amazing.
Oh man, that's got me super excited. I'm really curious to see all the outputs when it comes out. And I I guess I'll ask a similar question, putting my collector hat on. Are there any, like more like palettes where you brought some part of yourself in, whether it was like the sketch palette that you have in the Anti-Cyclones or the Mario Kart palette that you had in Dragons? Any little things like that that you can or want to share?
That one very personal palette, but I won't reveal. I'll let you discover that.
Okay, awesome. We'll find out. Well, Amanda, thanks for coming up. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Thanks for having me up. I have a question for William, and then I also have a po-op if anyone would like that. But the question first. Hello, William. So my question for you is, with the generative art that you're creating, I guess really, how do you select what you're going to keep? Generative art creates so many possibilities that I sometimes find myself, when I make things, not able to let go of certain things, or maybe feeling I might be moving too quickly and not capturing the art that I have created. So do you have any tips for that on how to capture and keep? And
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think that this is a struggle for every generative artist. Is the space is so infinite that you don't know where to stop and what to throw away. So my number one rule with this is, what is your initial concept? Does it fit, or does it? If it doesn't fit, you can just throw it away and use it for later. I think you don't have to put everything in one algorithm. I went on that road, and I think it's just killing us to just try to incorporate everything possible thing into one algorithm. Iteration is fine on one algorithm. So every time I see the output I posted today, I was like, okay, this is a cool output, but doesn't fit the concept. So ciao. And yeah, that's my only reason to not keep something. Does it fit the concept or not?
that's great advice. Thank you. That's really wonderful.
My pleasure.
Yeah, that's awesome. Grace, thanks for coming up. Please go ahead.
Thanks. Hi, William. So I have a few questions. How do you balance the intense focus and energy you put into your work with other stuff so that you stay interested and do not burn out?
I don't fully understand the question. I think there were like multiple questions.
No, the work you do is evidently very intense physically and mentally, right?
Yeah.
So
yes.
How do you balance it during the day or during periods with doing something else that helps you stay, focused on your work and not burn out?
I think I'm almost burnt out, so I don't know if I'm of good advices, but it's mostly, I think it's mostly about taking breaks. Like I was very not good at this before, and I tried to be better. But basically, the more breaks you take, the more fresh eye you have when you come back to your algorithm. So you take decisions way more sharply. While when you're constantly developing your algorithm, you don't see the outer, thing. So it's very hard to take a decision like that. And when it's hard to take the decision, you just keep working until something magic happens, which never happened. So every time I take a good break and come back, everything is clearer and I can progress. This is my number one advice on this, like take breaks. it's very important. It's easy to fall into the trap of constantly working on something. So now I developed the habit to work on like 2 or 3 algorithms at the same time. So depending on the day, if I don't feel it, I will take another algorithm and work on it. And that way also all my algorithm can talk to each other. I can find new thing into one algorithm and bring it back to the previous algorithm. So yeah, that's my way of dealing with this. And I don't have a choice because my son is here, so I have to be off the computer most of the time. Yeah, the summer has been tough.
Another question about balance is how do you balance the commercial aspect of your work, like having to release work, like having a commitment with LACMA in this case, and then having the freedom as an artist to release work when you want?
I never accept constraints. If they're like very rude constraint, I won't work with the person or the institution. I think you can't constrain artists. They have to do their thing and to share and to talk and to communicate in their own words. And so I think it's very important to stay true to yourself. I always deliver the best of me, whatever the event, if it's on chain, off chain, whatever the thing. If it's like LACMA, if it's the small gallery near my place, I will still deliver the same quality. So that way, I'm still proud of myself. I don't make weird choices.
Great. My last one is, have you ever found yourself deep into a project and say you're well advanced, about to be done, and or about to release it, and you feel, fuck it, this is no longer meaningful to me? And if you found yourself in that situation, what have you done? How do you deal with it?
Interesting. Usually, what I share has been through a lot of processes already, a lot of thoughts, and a lot of things I share. I would hate it maybe 2, 3, 4 months before. And when I come back on it, I'm like, oh no, that's good enough, so I can share it with the world. But I try to not share as soon as I create. So I give myself a bit of a buffer to take a step back and to just digest what I did and what I want to do, if it fits my perspective, my views, my goal. So yeah, I try to not to share too quickly, to not be overflowed with feedbacks, with hype, with anything that I won't be proud of months after because the hype passed. So I try to be very thoughtful about that. Am I actually sharing this picture? If yes, it has to be like something I'm proud of. So yeah, I have a hard time to share the failings, and there's a lot of failings, but I don't know. I don't like to spend too much time on there, so I try to share the best, basically.
Thank you.
I'm just saying, William, you should do a regular post, Failing Friday. Would love to see those, because I'm sure they're great too.
Maybe I was thinking about something like that. Like maybe every month I do like a GIF or video about all the main output I had this month, something like that. But maybe when I will have more time.
Well, I just want to chime in as a parent as well. It is really hard to find balance, and I love all these questions that William's been thinking through with us. I also wanted to let everyone know that we'll do another Spaces with LACMA on the day of the release next Tuesday, and other conversations as well. I'm trying to do a conversation with actually one interesting thing that I'll just mention as we're closing up is that as many of you know, LACMA had a big exhibition recently about the pioneers of early computer art, and Frieder Naka and Vera Molnar, who are two great kind of legends in terms of computer art, they also did homages to Paul Klee. And we might do a conversation with Frieder Naka, who is in his mid 80s and does not have a smartphone. So I'm trying to figure out if we could do something on Zoom or on Discord. But there's so many interesting sort of vantage points to think about William's work, and one of them is the fact that he is continuing this legacy and tradition of using computers to make art. So anyway, thank you so much, Jared and Priyank and Collector's Corner, and we'll really look forward to William sharing all of this with everyone soon.
All right. Well, thank you, Elsie. Thank you for the great questions, everybody. And thank you so much, William, for spending the time. I know you have your kid, it's late over there. So we really, really appreciate you and appreciate all the thought and sharing your art with us. And thank you, everybody, for listening.
My pleasure.
Oh, sorry.
No, my pleasure. That was it. Always a good pleasure to talk with you guys.
Likewise, always. It's always great to talk to you, man. And thank you again, Elsie, for the opportunity and putting this all together along with Cactoid Labs. And really looking forward to the next thing from LACMA, the next thing from William, and chatting with everybody here again. So thank you.
And I think it looks like Amanda maybe has Amanda, did you create a POAP? That would be so cool.
Right.
I did. If it's not a trouble, I did create one based on the conversation with William. So thank you for sharing a piece of yourself, William. It inspired the artwork created for the POAP. So the POAP is a proof of attendance protocol for those who haven't captured their memories yet on the blockchain. And it's a secret word delivery. So if you have the POAP app, you will go to the bottom right corner and hit the plus sign and use secret word to mint this. And the secret word for today for this is all lowercase WM distance, as in William Mapan distance, WM distance. And I have a recording of who is here. So if you missed this, you can reach out and I can send you a mint link to capture your time spent in this space. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for doing that.
Cool. All right. Well, then I guess thank you again, everybody. And looking forward to seeing the art.
Me too. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you for tuning into Collector's Corner. We really appreciate you taking the time to listen. If you like this episode and want to help us out, please subscribe and leave us a review on your podcasting platform of choice, like Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and follow us on YouTube. Please also follow us on Twitter for announcements as we expand to other social and content platforms. Our Twitter handle is @collectors_XYZ. We'd also love to hear any feedback you have, so please comment or reach out. We're always striving to be more useful and get better so we can help you in your collecting journey. The Collector's Corner team and their guests are not registered investment advisors. All views expressed on this podcast are personal opinions and are not specific inducements to make particular investments or investment strategies and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. This show is solely for informational and entertainment purposes only. Before making any financial decisions, please consult a professional.